One way to cope, though, is planning for the future on the other side of COVID. My first guest is doing just that. State Senator Kevin Kelly from Stratford is the new Republican leader in the Senate, and right now he's crafting an agenda with lawmakers as they look forward to the next session coming up in January. Senator Kelly, welcome back to Face the Facts.
Good morning, Mike. It's always great to be here.
In the latest election, the Democrats picked up more seats in the State House. Are you hopeful about getting some legislation passed, and what are your priorities this time around?
Well, certainly, we're always hopeful, especially at the beginning of a new session, to get things accomplished for Connecticut. We'd like to make sure, as we move forward, that the middle class is protected, and that we're going to be focusing on is really the affordability of Connecticut, as well as protecting the middle class, not only from tax increases, but also, and more importantly, as you mentioned at the outset, this dealing with the COVID pandemic and making sure that the most vulnerable in our society are protected and that they don't have the same results that they did this spring as we go through the next second and hopefully not, but possibly third waves of the virus.
And we are in unprecedented times. The way the state has been governed over the last 8 months was unprecedented. How are we doing as a whole handling this pandemic? In your district, in fact, Stratford schools went remote for a few weeks.
Yeah, well, as the community spread increases, obviously you got to keep focused not just on the community spread and the infection rate, but more importantly, the hospitalizations and mortality rates. As I said, we've got to make sure that we protect the most vulnerable, which are our seniors in nursing homes. And that's going to be a challenge moving forward. Challenge is how the General Assembly will look, whether or not we'll go in. But there are some things we have to look at, like the budget, but other things, maybe not so much, because at the end of the day, we must maintain that health and safety is first and foremost at the top of any agenda.
The Democrats are signaling they would like to push even more now for a public option when it comes to health insurance. That, of course, goes up against the major insurance companies that are here in Connecticut. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they promised the Affordable Care Act 8 years ago, and that middle-class families would have lower premiums. And in fact, the opposite was true. And now here they are again, making another bold promise that they're going to, reduce premium, but it comes at a cost in Connecticut. We saw reports last week that Connecticut is dead last in personal income growth and dead last in the nation in job growth. But yet the public option would go in direct competition with our state's flagship industry, which is the insurance industry, and put thousands of Connecticut jobs out of work. The Republicans have proposed a reinsurance program, which can reduce premium up to 20%, leverages federal dollars back into state, and keeps those good paying insurance jobs, while also deals with something that the public option doesn't, which is the real cost driver, the expensive cost of medical care. We would tear a page out of Republican Governor Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, who was able to use what's called benchmarking to reduce the rate of growth from 10 to 12% per year down to less than 4%, saving Massachusetts billions of dollars. We think that's the better way. It protects the middle class, allows you to keep your doctor, and most importantly, reduces health care premiums and keeps Connecticut jobs.
So now to get that done, cooperation is important. So one of the feathers in the cap of your predecessor, Len Fasano, was that bipartisan budget back in 2017, which perhaps happened in spite of Governor Dan Malloy. This governor deals with people in a much different way than Dannell Malloy did. How is your relationship with Governor Lamont, and how do you see compromise happening in the future?
Well, so far, so good. We're just not even a month into being a new leader. We have had discussions, and I look forward to continuing to have discussions. Obviously, we may not always be on the same page, but I think it's important to have the dialogue so that we can get the voice of middle-class Connecticut to the table. One of the issues you do have in Connecticut is a single-party rule, and while 40% of the electorate elected Republicans, you got to make sure that, we just don't have a single vision for what's best for Connecticut, but we have every vision at the table.
Reducing taxes is something that's very important to you. You've said that publicly many times. How can you achieve that, considering how we are financially in the state right now during this COVID crisis?
Well, you referenced before the bipartisan budget, and when we had a tie in the Senate in 17 and 18, we came up with a historic budget that has resulted in a rainy day fund that, quite frankly, is in insulating the Connecticut economy from many of the harms of the COVID pandemic. Once we didn't have the tie in 19 and 20, the Democrats no longer came to us. But yet those structural reforms are still present, and they're actually benefiting not only the Connecticut economy, but the Connecticut middle class. So what I think we have to do is have that conversation. We have to look at much the same way families do in their kitchen budget, is if revenue falls, you don't make as much because you either, you don't work as many hours or you got laid off. You got to look at the other side of the ledger and make them work together and meet. And maybe it's not cutting things, but looking at a better way that might be more efficient in the delivery of the goods and services that the state provides. And I think if we start to look at things in a creative manner, we can get there.
Senate Minority Leader Kevin Kelly, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time, and good luck coming up in January in the next session.
Thank you very much, Mike.